everybody. Jeff the Hawk, leader for the Babylon Rogues here. And today, I will be reading you all Chapter 20 of The Walking Dead Hope, the Walking Dead fan fiction written by Goofy Gomez. Thanks for giving us permission to read your story, Goofy Gomez. You rock! Now, this is apparently a love story between, Louis and Clementine from this series called The Walking Dead. If you're wondering, no, I'm not talking about the TV series. I'm talking about the video game franchise called The Walking Dead. So, sorry for the confusion there. Anyway, are you ready to get reading? Okay, let's go. What do you mean AJ's gone? Clementine exclaimed, frantically getting to her feet as fast as her swollen belly would allow. Louis stood with her, his hands on her lower back for support. Ted shuffled his feet awkwardly. His rising sun shone on the wooden floor, dust particles floating in midair. Before dinner, he said he wasn't hungry, so I let him use my coloring pencils, Ted explained, stepping back when he saw the fire in Clem's eyes light up. When I came back, he was gone, so I figured he'd come here instead. And you didn't think to come check? Clem asked, throwing her arms up in the air. She felt the baby kick wildly, her anger masking the pain she was feeling. I didn't think he'd run away, Ted defended himself, though his eyes were downcast in shame. Louis stepped in between them, eyeing Clem warily. Let's just cool off for a moment, he said. I'll go ask Violet and Asim to help me find him. He couldn't have gone far. You should stay here and rest, he directed the last part to Clem, who scoffed. Like heck, as if I'm resting, she exclaimed, already making her way to the door before she was stopped by Louis. Honey, Eleanor already said you need to take it easy, he argued, and I'm worried what'll happen to the baby if you go trampsing through the woods with no direction where you can barely move without hurting. Let us handle it, and I promise you AJ will be back home in no time. She huffed in annoyance, but agreed nonetheless. There was no reason for her to put herself in danger now of all times. Reluctantly, she nodded and followed Louis and Ted out of the room. The trio rushed through the halls as fast as Clem could. On their way, they ran into Willie and Ruby, both of whom were frantically searching for some of the dorms. He's not here, Ruby called to Ted, who shook his head. I think he may have gone outside, he said. Louis burst through the courtyard doors, holding them open for Clem to waddle through. Her hands drew circles on her belly as a way to calm herself down. He's fine, Clementine, she kept telling herself, repeating it in her brain like a mantra. Louis rushed to where Violet and Asim sat on the tables. At the sight of him, both of them stood up and rushed to him. Violet held her meat cleaver in one hand, the compound bow strapped to her back. Ted told us what happened, Violet said immediately. We're coming with you, Asim piped in, nodding at Louis. Louis smiled at his friends, looking down at Clem, she was caressing her belly fiercely, her eyes darting to the gate every few seconds, with a promise to bring AJ back. He leaned in and placed a kiss on his wife's lips. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer to her. Please, she pleaded, tears in her eyes. These darn hormones, she thought, ruefully. Come back safe. I will, he said nodding. I promise. You stay here and let Ruby know if you need any help. With that, the trio made their way to the gate, where Willie was waiting for them. He opened it and wished them good luck before they were stopped once again by Minnie rushing at Violet. She wrapped her arms around her girlfriend gently, pulling back and placing a soft kiss on her lips. Good luck, she whispered to Violet, who couldn't hide her blush from creeping up her face. Glaring at Louis and Asim, when they smirked, she pushed past them and walked into the woods, the two men at her heels. Louis brandished Charles, its wooden surface resting on his right shoulder. Birds were singing the beginning of a new day. Dried up leaves scrunched, under the weight of their boots as he walked through the forest. About 20 minutes later, after not seeing any trace of the boy, they decided that splitting up was the best bet. Asum went off toward the east, finally bounding to the west, and Louis took a deep breath as he ventured deeper into the southern part of the woods. He could hear the faint grumbling of distant walkers prowling for prey. Shuddering slightly, he walked forward, looking around. Although he'd seen them 1,000 times over, the woods never ceased to creep him out this early in the morning. Everything was still starting to wake from its slumber, coming to life as the sun made its way through the sky. He passed a fallen tree. Its bark was splashed with dry blood. He noticed. Weird, he thought, frowning. He heard a loud growl to his left and turned. A walker was trapped under a large tree branch, his arms flailing about in search of Louis. He hunched over it. As he neared it, he noticed puncture marks on his shirt, dry blood staining at the white fabric. These are recent, he breathed, inspecting the slash marks. AJ may have gone this way, he thought to himself. Before he could delve further into his theory, he heard a scream coming from his left. Asum! He stood up in a hurry, jumping over the fallen trees and sprinting through the woods. As the soft breeze picked up, the leaves above him rustled, the sound of it almost drowning his thoughts. He rushed past a small bridge that ran over the river and saw the source of the scream. Asum was struggling with the walker on the far side of a ramshackle hut, its deadly grip strong on his forearm. Asum's bow was lying on the ground a few feet away from him, and a walker was crawling toward him from the edge of the river. "Louis!" he exclaimed when he spotted the freckled man, his eyes filled with fear. Springing into action, Louis took care of the walker first, stopping his head with the sole of his boot. He used Charles to dispatch the walker that had a grip on Asum's arm, crushing its skull with a sickening crunch. As his grip on his arm loosened, Asum landed on his tush on the ground, breathing heavily. Louis offered his hand to the man, who took it graciously. He dusted himself up, attempted to cool his breathing. "Thanks, man," he said, nodding at Louis. "No problem," Louis replied, with a lopsided grin. "Wouldn't want you dying before you get married." "What would I tell Ruby?" "Don't joke about that, man." "Sorry," he said sheepishly. Looking around, Louis looked around, noticing for the first time where they were. He set Charles against the wall of the hut and raised an eyebrow. "Why are you at the fishing hut?" Asum picked up his bow, strapping it to his back. "I remember AJ mentioning something about fishing to me last night, and I thought maybe he had come here." Louis frowned, unable to recall such a comment from the young boy. "Didn't he talk specifically about this place?" "Not that I remember," Asum said, shrugging. But where else could he be referring to? Louis racked his brain for clues, thinking about recent interactions with AJ. To his recollection, the boy hadn't mentioned anything about going fishing, as it had always been his least favorite chore while at the school. Suddenly, a specific memory flashed before his eyes. Something that had happened over 5 years ago, quite a ways away from his particular fishing hut. He grabbed Charles and looked up at the clear sky. It was a beautiful light blue by now, streaks of yellow from the sun shining through it. He got his bearings and then turned to Asum, who was staring at him like he was crazy. "I know where he is," he announced, nodding. "How?" "I just do," he promised. "Go back and tell Clem I know I got it." "Go back and let Clem know I got it." "Fine, Vi, too." "No need having her looking around for no reason." "Are you going to tell me where AJ is?" Asum said, irritated by now. "Just trust me, okay?" Louis asked. Asum rolled his eyes and nodded. "All right, I'll go tell Clem," he promised, adjusting his bow. "You both better come back safe." "We will." With that being said, Louis bounded off into the forest. He kept the sun on his left, avoiding the places where the groans and moans of nearby walkers were heard the loudest. He'd been walking for about half an hour when he reached what he'd been looking for. A barbed fence ran the length of the yard. Sheaths of tall grass covered most of it. And this is where we'll stop for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 of Jet the Hawk Reads Chapter 20 of The Walking Dead Hope.